Okay. Let me check. Everything is good. We're gonna get caption. Okay, so fun unit today, we're going to talk about social engineering and phishing. Our lab is going to entail a little bit of phishing approach. So I'll show you some of the tools that you can use. There are many tools, right? Unfortunately, we can't go above that. So in the future, I might consider adding some components to this lab for the future classes, like phishing, or even some area in voice masking and so on, or we can probably integrate it into the class later on. But let's talk about pretexting, as some of you might be going for pen testing, and also this is every company now train their employees for phishing, just to look for the type of clues that will point out that it is a phishing email and so on. But the social engineering aspect is really interesting, and it evolves over time, from what I've seen, right? As you know, that a lot of like scamming type of activities, it really involves like psychology and thinking about what people need and want. Okay, so pretexting is just a way to create a false scenario to trick someone to reveal confidential information. And you get a lot of this, right? You get a phone call saying that you owe tax. You get a phone call saying that you qualify for loans. So whatever it is that they know that would be interested in, right? That will be the campaign that they would go for. And so it would be various into perhaps season or the people interests and so on. Now, the interesting part is statistically shown that technical people, IT people, also fall for this kind of thing because we are human beings, right? So pretexting is a way that we exploit, right, the human trust. And just because maybe lack of attention, a lot of the time pressure to do something under a certain amount of time. It is a marketing approach as well, right? Like they would say, you have to respond within, so long, otherwise this deal or this discount or this promotion is no longer be available. So to build the trust to be able to devout like personal or private information is a tactic, right? It is a way to get people to open up to you. Also tailgating is a big thing. So I was at Cisco campus a while ago. If you ever visit Cisco, they got like 10 buildings on the same street, right? And they have so many different employees. So I had forgotten something in my car, and this is in San Jose. And then I went out and then I forgot that I can't come back in because, the conference has started. So I waited at the door and I saw a person that was coming in, and I asked her if I could also come into the building, and they were pretty well trained, so they said no to me. They said, I have to wait for someone, a security guard, to come and bring me in. Otherwise, I cannot tailgate, right? So tailgate is a way for someone to wait at the door saying that they forgot their keys or they're visiting the facility, and please let me in, right? So the Cisco employee, I was really impressed, right? She did not let me in, and she said, and I even showed my ID and my badge for my conference at Cisco. And they said, no, I'm sorry, right? Because anybody can print up a badge. Anybody can put a little sticker with my name on my shirt, right? And so on. So they did not let me in. So tailgating is also an approach that you see. Now, for the first question, we're given scenario, and you often see this on certification type of questions. We have to determine whether it is pretexting or impersonation. So impersonation is to pretend to be someone, right? To take on an identity of an individual or something. Impersonation can be in the form of attack where we would use someone else's IP address or MAC address. So for the first scenario, it says an attacker contacts a user under a false pretense of an IT support specialist. And in this case, it is impersonation, where the attacker pretend to be the technician, right? The specialist. So that's impersonation. Now, pretexting is really a false triggery type of activity, right? So for B, we would see that the attacker tricks the user by redirecting the user to the common website that prompts the user to enter her password and bank account information. And this is a pretexting. So when you're looking at phishing campaign, some phishing campaign would be impersonation, like the voicemail that you receive or the phone call that you receive, right? They pretend to be an IRS agent. And then some campaign, you would see that it is both, okay? And then some campaign, you would see it's purely pretexting. So pretexting is just a way to trick someone, right, to devour their private information. For the third scenario, C, Angel receives a fake phone call from the IRS requesting the payment for overdue tax. And you see a lot of this now, right? So there are two things going on. The person who calls pretend to be the IRS agent. So that is impersonation. The second thing that's happening is the triggery, right? So that's pretexting. So you see that with both, okay? And so it depends on the scenario that you would see. So when you look at this, right, the keywords here is the tricks right here, and also the IRS, I'm sorry, the fake phone call, which is a triggery, and then the IRS requesting payment. And for the people who know, right, they would tell you that IRS don't personally call you, right, to pay your whatever. And so if you pay, then you fall into their trap. Okay, D, an employee is tricked into downloading files that contain keylogger Trojans, right? So that is pretexting. And that could be part of the email, enticing them to do something. So pretexting is really capitalized on the person's interest. Could be also a trend. Sometimes that might be something that's happening in social media that people want, or a product that people look for. So what you see is you see a lot of these psychology type of play that being used for social engineering. Any question? So what kind of techniques are really used for pretexting, right? And we have to understand this so that way we can train our employees to look for these things. We also would be more aware as a person, right? Because we could fall for the same thing. So pretexting usually contain a convincing story, something that would be believable. There gotta be some sense of urgency. So they try to pressure you to commit something because it's, like I said, a lot of the security thing is about time, right? But if you have more time to think about it, right, you would reason through it and you would see that it is a scam or it is false. So they would pressure you, right, into committing certain type of activity. And that usually is by manipulating the victim's emotion or compel them to divulge information. And so if the person, it feels like it's an urgent thing, they would try to give out information or do something. So when you look at like deepfake, deepfake is a way that they would mask someone's voice or face using AI, right? Through deep learning. And, so based on the FBI study, they said that it takes about 30 seconds so if they have 30 seconds of your voice, right, they would be able to get the AI to generate your voice. So let's say that they would use that to call your family member and say that, you have an urgent situation, emergency, your car broke down, please Zelle so-and-so this amount of money so that way they can help you fix your car. And that happens before, right? Or someone is in jail, needs to be bailed out, or yeah, that, and they also do FaceTime now, right? So they're able to mask the image of the person. They are talking on FaceTime, but what you see is your family member, right? So it is, now what's real and what's not real is a little bit harder to detect. But you do see the story behind it, right? Like someone car broke down, someone's in jail. I really need the money. Please wire the money immediately, right? So you see this type of campaign. So it really plays on the emotion. Any question? So how can the company avoid these things, pretexting or exposing sensitive information through pretexting? So the number one safeguard area is going to be security training. The more you train the people, right, the more skills that you arm your people with, the better in the long run that you would see. So if you have regular training throughout the year, every few months, right? Security awareness training, and then you can also simulate the situation. So one of my student or my former student, she was doing the apprenticeship with the Fulton School District. Some of you probably heard about this, right? She was hired on to do a phishing campaign for Fulton Unified School District. She built out some, a web page where, it's a landing page when the user clicks that link and, it will be coming from, the pretext part is the HR story, right? Like, your account has been updated, please, log in to check your account, payable information for the Unified School District. And about 60% of the employees actually did that, right? And then she also used AI to generate some of the things that makes it look believable. Her and Amy, actually, she's in the room. I should tell Amy to tell the story. Amy, you want to share? No? So, no? Was it 60%, Amy? Oh, okay. Yeah, when they told me it was 60% total, so that's what I heard. So Amy and another student were working on that same project, right? And they really liked it, so they incorporated it for other school district and so on. So that's really interesting. So you can build out some kind of security training that way to simulate the situation, and then that you can understand like where you are at as a company. And so with that, we have to take a look at impersonation. So how can you prevent impersonation attack, right? So whenever that you get the phone call or when you look at the email or when you have some form of request for your private information, take the time to ask the question, right? To verify. So if you get a phone call from a family member saying that they urgently need the money, someone else in that family would probably know the situation, right? And so you need to verify with another individual. So we want to verify the identity who is requesting, and then be skeptical about the requests of the unknown sources. Implementing multi-factor authentication. And this overall access is going to help you mitigate a lot of the risk, right? So, because even if they're able to obtain passwords, right? What if you also using biometrics, or maybe like an email, or maybe a phone, like a smartphone, to be able to verify your identity. So people give out password perhaps because they false for the pretext part, but if you're able to have multi-factor, it's required that they have another factor to be able to get access, right? So that just gives us a little bit more time to maybe change the password, to be able to disable the account and so on. And then we want to share this information to the community so that way we know that this potentially could impact other people. And with that, it is a lesson learned for other people. So it's important to really collaborate. And then you can also research, right? You can see, the type of tactics that is happening to other companies. And so that way you can build the effective training for your company. Okay, so there are more details about impersonation after pretexting, so you can take a look. And I tried to put down like how it's happening, the techniques. So they can forge documents, they can hack into accounts, they can use social media to be able to get more information about the individual, the target. They would mimic the behavior, even speech pattern and appearance. So that's common now with AI. And so with that, what we see is these two things is going to play on human trust. So as we trust, we would be able to give out personal or private information. And so the combat part, you can find that here. There are fraudulent systems that can be used to really detect pattern and things. So when you're looking at agency that is investigating these things, they would be able to have like sample of things like voice or image or whatever, right? That they have been investigating. Deepfake is not prevalent in United States yet, right? They do have cases that's happening, and so but in other nations, you do see that it's very popular. Okay. Now, from a security standpoint, you should always think about what kind of security approaches that you can use, right? Filtering system and encryption is always going to be some of the key areas that we can protect data, because ultimately, right, account information and all of that is part of your system data. And so we want to make sure that we have the proper alarm system, intrusion detection system, prevention system, firewall, encryption, and then also the practices behind it, right? So here are some of the tools for protection. You can use Iron Scale. There's a way that you can filter out your email. I think Outlook itself, you can also set up rules. But if you have SIEM, right, you're able to control content filter. But there are a lot of email systems that you can find. A lot of them are proprietary systems, so they would charge you license per user. Would be able to, so I see, I used to contract with companies that use Proofpoint. Proofpoint is pretty good at protecting email that is inbound and outbound. So anything that looks suspicious, like social security number, passwords, things like that, it's going to ask for approval before it's able to go outbound. So you would control a lot of things like leakage of data and so on. Trend Micro, you probably hear a lot about them, a lot of advertisement, right? So they are a security software company, but you do see implementation because email is like the #1 area for IT that we worry about things coming in and out. So If you see malware, it's able to look at like, you know, we talked about MIME and things in my other class, right? MIME tells us about attachment in email. So a lot of these systems, it actually analyze like the type of attachment you have and then the size of attachment. You can also control, right, user inbox and how they receive attachment. If it's too big of an attachment, it needs to have higher level approval through IT and security in order for it to go through. Now, with that, it does slow down communication as far as sending email, receiving email, and so on, but you do have a layer of protection. So the downside in implementing security approaches, you do have like slow in throughput, right? Like people would complain that, oh, you know, if I don't have access to that email, I cannot do my work. So productivity level will be somewhat impacted. However, right, in the long run, you do see that at least some form of protection will help strengthen your posture and security. Okay, so let me move forward down in case you're still recording that, right? Oh, maybe I just need to scroll. Huh? Okay, so for 5, it asks you what type of technical solutions can be implemented to detect impersonation. Okay, so we talked about fraudulent detection, using verification system to detect fraudulent activities and behavior. I think lately, right, you see that IRS, DMV, and a lot of organizations are really transferring their system, incorporating multi-factor authentication, where you have to also use a form of secondary authentication for your identity, right? Also, they need to have a way to validate your information and who you are and the type of system you use. Because you do see that there are a lot of bots that are being used for these type of like phishing campaign, impersonation campaign. So you would incorporate, and this could be advanced fraudulent system, you know, some of that can be software, and then some of that can also be both, like hardware and software. And that could be expensive, right? Depending on how large is your organization. Is it an enterprise or, you know, on a lot of the smaller scale business, they might not have the investment to go for something that is very costly. But overall, what we can see is that we have firewall in every operating system, right? At least at the host base level. We also have firewall capability in networks. We have intrusion detection system that will also be able to control, you know, where that's coming from and how, you know, the communication between system, the destination where that's going to. And then encryption technology can also be a good point, like a good area that we can look into. Web-based encryption, data encryption, email encryption is also big, right? So if you have a lot of sensitive data that's coming through the email, then consider using email encryption. Now, like I mentioned before, encryption is going to require resources and time. So you are going to see, but a lot of the things that we have now with advanced technology, there's not a lot of lag time with encryption. When you implement encryption, like encryption for email, you have to teach the user how to use it effectively. So that way encryption can be a protective measure. But if you don't have the proper way to use it, so encryption is about, right, taking the data and make it unreadable, but it's using keys. And so how you're keeping those keys are essential. So it's important to think about, like, if you're implementing encryption, right, you got to make sure that your keys are also protected. And then your MFA, your multi-factor authentication, I think now that's pretty much everywhere. It is just an added layer to authentication and controlling access. And then in the back, we need to make sure that we analyze the traffic pattern. Now, if you have advanced systems for security appliance, the pattern that you give it, the data that you give it is going to help you, because now a lot of the system have AI capability. So it's going to understand, right, what is acceptable behavior and what is outlier, and it's going to block it based on outliers. So you have a lot of behavior-based system now. So that's going to be helpful, but we always want to make sure that we analyze our network traffic, right? And then also looking at events, your logs, your login attempts, success or failure, transactional activity on your databases. If someone goes in and access a whole column or a whole table on the database, the sysadmin and the security admin should have a notification right away, right? Because, you know, a lot of the time the attacker will be very successful in either injection or how they would get into the system. And then if they're able to download your whole table, right, that data can go out to the darknet just like this instantly in itself. I was reading an article the other day and they were talking about, like, you know, the data exchange on the dark web and how much everything is worth and how fast things move, right? Because there are a lot of lawsuits about data leak with enterprises and corporations, like, for example, T-Mobile and such. And the article was written by a former hacker, and he was talking about like how he started his career and how, you know, how they communicate in an encrypted channel to be able to exchange data. But once data is then pushed into the dark web community, a lot of the time, the majority of the data that's given to the community there is not usable, right? But then you have critical sensitive data that is being sold for a lot of money. So what they do is they would negotiate a price on like a certain set of data that they want, right? Like your social security number, credit card information, health information, and so on. So very interesting. So we want to look at the transaction activities, especially on our systems that contain a lot of data containers, right? Okay, another scenario questions, number 6. Identify the type of phishing attack given the below scenario. And in the next part of the notes, it talks about different type of phishing attack. So A, Carla receives a text message claiming to be from a popular online retailer informing her that she won a gift card. The message asks Carla to click the link and enter the credit card details to claim the prize, right? So it is a form of phishing, but it is also smishing. Okay, smishing is SMS phishing. That's through your simple message format. And it's also HTTPS. Why? Because there's a link that's incorporated into the content of the text. So you see that, right? And that link is going to be connected to their server, right? And it's going to be able to capture the password. So as she input her user account information, that gets inputted into maybe a database that they would use, right, to later access her account. And then B, an employee receives an email that appears to be from the CEO of the company containing the names of the project team members. The email requests the employee to provide project sensitive information and design. And this is it's not truly phishing as what you see, but is a form of pretext. So it's business email compromise. So this has its own category now. Right, is to be able to obtain information through impersonation and pretext. A lot of times it seems to be urgent. So if it comes from the executive, you know, you better oblige, otherwise, because you want to keep your job, right? At the same time, you should verify, right? We want to verify with our upper management people saying that, you know, so-and-so had requested this, should I give this information to this executive, right? But then executive can be bought too, right? According to some of the agency. So you do see that, you know, people sometime would leak data for a certain price. Okay, so different category of phishing, you can see that here. So we would see urgent messages coming from email a lot of the times. So what are the things that you should look for? Common signs, right? Request for personal data, that should be a flag. Login credential, second flag. Credit card information, third. And then unreasonable threats, like the IRS situation, right? You don't want to get fined, or sense of urgency. Look for spelling errors or grammatical errors. Suspicious URL, right? And then also, if it's too good to be true, then it is too good to be true, right? There's voice phishing, where they would call or leave voicemail. So things like extended vehicle warranty, I probably got like maybe 25 of those at one time. Bank account information. And then your HTTPS, that's what we looked at. This is a URL-based attack. So it is gonna be built around the user or the victim clicking on that link. And so it's capitalized on the traffic encryption between the browser, right? So TLS and SSL. Most of the time you won't see that as a non-secure website, because your system would notify you if you're trying to access like a non-secure website. So now they are very creative about having the link sending directly to their server that is hosted securely. And then they will take down that host, so it will not last forever. So and then they would, temporarily host it there. So that way it is harder for investigator to track it. So how can you identify HTTPS phishing? If it's shortened URL, question that right away. You know how when you send a URL, you can make it shorten, right? If it's hyperlinked text, if it's embedded into a text, and if there's something misspelled, right? It looks close to the real thing, like some type of bank name, but it will be like a letter off. And then you have clone phishing. This is real email sent from an individual or the company, like what we see with the CEO situation, right? Often you see this with business compromise email. And then they would clone the exact email, so it looks very real with all the certificate, all the information, all of the signature and all of that, right? And then but sometime on the email, if there's a link that you click, it might not work, and so on, so it looks real. So how do you know? You might receive multiple of the same email, misspelled email address, and then hyperlink text. It might show the real address that's not shortened, or so you would see. Now we talked about SMS phishing. I forgot to close the bracket on this one. So this is pretty popular, right? And then if you try to block them, they will try to use alternative numbers to do that, and then to authenticate requests. And then you got pop-up phishing, which is more looking like a pop-up ad. So that will be browser-based notifications or some kind of urgent messages that's popping up. So you should click close. But I think security software is pretty good at getting rid of all the unsafe pop-up, right? So we should always use security software on all devices, including smartphone. We know that, right? Okay. So let's move 6 down a little further so we can answer the rest. Okay, so for C, Han receives a phone call from his bank asking him to provide his bank account credit card information for security updates. This is a call, so it is voice and asking for bank information, right? They're phishing out bank information, so vishing with a V. For D, Christina connects to one of the two identical wireless network names. She was redirected to her company's website login page. So this is an evil twin. It looks like the real, right, access point. But they do that so that way they can capture the user information and traffic information. So this is a form of what's known as domain phishing. So evil twin can be done on a device that looks like a router, right? That functions similar to the router, but in the back, it would run additional tools to be able to analyze the traffic and also capture credential information. So it uses a similar OS, like Linux embedded system, very similar to Kali. Okay, so where can you find a device like this, right? You would see Hack5 would sell something like that, like Wi-Fi Pineapple would work. I've seen some stuff on Amazon that people customize it and they sell it. I'm sure that you can turn a Raspberry Pi into something like this, right? Because Raspberry Pi has Wi-Fi capability. And then you can add a dongle to it and then just, amplify your Wi-Fi signal and make it look like that. And then you just put it on a battery pack and you can take it anywhere. So it becomes more of like a portable device. So evil twin is a very common thing, right? So you see public Wi-Fi, question it. You see identical public Wi-Fi information or access point broadcasting, right? You should question that beacon information. Number 7, how can social media phishing be detected? So a lot of the times people get scammed through social media, right? And if they have private account information or setting, someone has to request connection as friend or be part of their community, right? So you would see the sign would be a friend request from suspicious account, right? Messages containing obscure link or suspicious link, or online discount or unrealistic messages or videos. So a lot of people would tend to fall for that because, they might believe that it's from a friend or from someone they know, or if someone requested friend. I have family members that were victim of this, right? And then their account got hacked and then it impacted everybody in that circle. So what you see is that, social media phishing is very, very popular and common. And then we talked about pop-up phishing. So how can we detect that, right? You would see unsafe site and content through your browser notifications. I think browsers are doing a better job now, right? Your Chrome or your Edge, or even if you're using Opera or your iOS browser, right? You might have a new tab or a window that's open to load additional content. That's a form of pop-up phishing. You might get a little urgent message on the pop-up requesting immediate actions. I think maybe a few years ago when we teach phishing in just concept, it is very different to what you see now, right? You have newer categories, you have more advanced way on how phishing tactics is being performed. So as as technology change, you would see that these type of criminal activity is also changing. And then for 9, it says, what type of phishing attack entails the attacker controlling the communication flow and is responsible for sending and receiving all messages to gain personal information from both parties. So they have to do a man in the middle with the phishing, so that way they can intercept, right, the type of messages. So they would generate the message to a certain entity. So let's say you and I are trying to communicate, the man in the middle will pop in and they would send you the message that they intend for you to click, right? And they would respond to me, making me think that I'm still talking to you. And then at some point, they would trick me into giving them my personal information because I trusted you. So I thought that I'm giving you the information. So that's a way. So it's basically they plant themselves in the middle and they would intercept messages. And because I trust the person that's receiving the message, I would not think twice about giving them my private information. So this is what you see with man in the middle. And then one of the term that you probably heard over and over again in every security class is whaling, right? This is the phishing attack that's targeting specific groups, usually high executives, so that way they can obtain organization information. That could be that they are being paid to do so, right? Or there might be some intention. Some hacktivist group would do this because maybe they have some kind of something against that company, or maybe they're trying to find out more about that company. So spear phishing, or what we call it, whaling. Whaling is for executive, and spear phishing is just for group, right? Specific groups. Any question? So one of the things that I did not include in the assignment that will probably be useful to learn is your angler phishing. And this is going to be social media centric. So they would pose as a support staff to create a fake account, and then they would contact a disgruntled user, and usually found through comments. So people who's angry at the social media company, and then they would try to obtain information that way. So it's just using an angle to be able to obtain information. So the way that you would look for that is to see if the account is not verified, or if there's very little information about their profile. That is questionable. And then another one is image-based phishing. So this is would be images that would contain links. It would be embedded, right? And embedding things into images is easy to do. There are tools that we have to do that. So they would put a link into the image, and then if you hover over the image, you might see that link without clicking it. And then, or if you look at the link, sometime that they might have some kind of error, or sometime you would see some kind of buttons that would attract your eye, or the call to action buttons like click now, and so on. So make sure that we verify the email content. And then your search engine phishing. So this is, if they're gonna make a page that looks kind of real, right? Looks close to real, based on keyword searches that would be popular in search engine. So, and a lot of this is really trend oriented, right? So if they know that most people would search for certain things, they would bill it based on that. Okay, like free vacation, free products, discount, job offers. You guys get job offers email? I see a lot of phishing email coming through RCCD with job offers. They do a better job now filtering it than before. But on the student side, so we have subcommittee meeting with the IT team sometimes, and we had voiced that to the IT team about screening and filtering student email for phishing a little bit better. Okay. So to identify the search engine phishing, right? Too good of an offer, once in a lifetime deal, likely it's not true, right? If the website is poorly made, you see that, it's probably just thrown together easily. And then you got the water hole phishing. This is gonna usually be targeting similar to what you see with spear phishing. It's gonna target a certain group, and it's using a third party to with this particular tactic. So the attacker would exploit the vulnerability on the website, infect it, hence the name Waterhole. Waterhole is just an infected website. There are millions of them, right? Every time that I read an article or I hear like, FBI speak at the conference, the number always increase. Or when you're looking at malware type of study, you see that they also list Waterhole. So they infected the website, and then the link is would be sent to the targeted group, and so that way they would be able to perform the attack. Okay. And then the man in the middle here. So if you want to read more about that, page 5. Okay. So earlier we saw a question based on business email compromise, your BEC. Usually this is impersonation of someone in the organization, higher level, that has authority. So social engineering is also about authority, right? Because we tend to trust the people with authority, like IRS agent, police officer, things like that. And then if there is unusual behavior or non-legal correspondence, then you should question that email. Okay. So for 11, it says Rachel receives an email with an image attachment from an unknown sender who urges her to download the image on her computer. What type of phishing tactic is used to target Rachel? What could be the consequences if Rachel downloads the image? So we learned that this is image-based and email phishing, right? Because she's encouraged to download an image, and it's being sent via email. So likely that there will be malware or some kind of embedded content that can be downloaded with the image, maybe a keylogger, which can be used to gather the user data. So keylogger generates, right, anything that you type. And if you took my Python class, right, you've seen projects, opportunity for that. It can be easily done in Python. You've probably seen YouTube video that it can be done in like maybe 12 lines in Python. So because we have libraries that allows the system to, right, to open up or listen in on the signal for the input, which is from the keyboard or the mouse or whatever that you use to enter the data. So definitely what you see for keylogger, they can embed it, and that becomes a Trojan because it's masked into an image or something else. And that's probably like the easiest approach, but it could be worse, right? It could be a ransomware, it could be a lot of different things. So now, if your anti-malware is as effective as it says, right, as soon as this individual download, it should try to contain it. But like I said, right, anti-malware system is only as good as its definition and signature. So if that is an unknown type of malware that's very new, if the source code is very new, then it probably won't be able to see that. But a lot of the antivirus system now, it doesn't care about definition anymore. It's about anything that's outside of the normal behavior or signature for our file. It's going to try to contain it. So when you have a false positive situation, you would see that it does a better job, but like it would try to quarantine the file and look at that file a little bit better. So, you know, even if we train the user, we've just got to make sure that we technically set right rules and restriction to make sure that we are still protecting the system in the case that they accidentally click on the link or they unknowingly click on the link or download something, right? And so on. Okay. For 12, how can we identify business email compromise attack, your BEC? So if it's urgent or high importance email, just pay attention to that, right? Unusual behaviors of the sender in the email context. No legal correspondence is included in the email. And the way that we would check is we can verify, right? If that sender is sending you a request, you should try to verify it with your manager or his colleagues or her colleagues or their colleagues. So we want to be able to make sure that we check that before you provide the information. Because once data is sent, it's really hard to kind of track like where it goes and also how, you know, it spreads, right? So we kind of have to map out like from this person, then it's going to go to the next level, and to contain it would be more difficult. So data leak is something that you don't want through BEC. Any question? And you can find that here on the bottom of page 5 going to 6. So let's talk about spoofing. I'm sure you heard about IP spoofing and MAC spoofing, but there's a lot more spoofing going on in security world. There's website spoofing, right? This has been done for a long time, since the 80s up until now, right? Since, you know, websites start to become more popular. So attacker would create fake websites, right? And you heard that with also Waterhole. So fake website that looks like real website, like your bank or something that you might be interested in. So how do you identify website spoofing? Look at like who hosted and also the URL that's being used, and then see the content of the site. Usually you tend to see errors or things that are misplaced. I've seen some context in this. They have there was a financial institution that I was working with, and the website looks identical to theirs, right? So they grab exactly all the source code and they put it together. And then on the bottom, you know how a lot of the banks, they would put the logo of like, you know, insurance company, you know, all of that. But when you put your cursor on it, it hovers and it would link to the insurance company or, you know, certificate company and so on. On this particular website, they're just images, right? So when you hover over it, there's no link to it. So what they did was they just copied the image and then they coded the image into it. But statically, you know, it looks exactly like the real thing. So the company had requested for that website to be taken down because they didn't want their users to fall for the trick. And then also some users were reporting that they were receiving email to access the website and it's a fake website. So you see website spoofing being used to be able to also obtain information, and they're very creative about that. Then you got email spoofing, right? So using fake email domain. Now when you do the forensic part for this, it's going to tell you the email headers is going to tell you exactly who that is. what type of server. So if they're using a false server, it's going to also track that, right? But when we do forensic, a lot of the times it's after the fact. So if, let's say, your employee is reporting that this email is being received, right, but they didn't take any action on it, you can perform the forensic by looking at the email itself, right, and then looking at the network traffic. So you would see, right, how it was sent, where it was sent from, and so on. And then that can be reported for, like, protection at the federal level. Okay, any questions? Okay, so if there's no domain verification under the SMTP, right, they can spoof it easily. So normally when you set up email domains, you want to make sure that there's verification. They would also include like domain or name that looks legitimate. Okay. Like, for example, if I want to try to fake Nike.com, right, like an employee from there, I would try to make it look real, as real as possible. So you want to also look at how the email is used to send. So unsolicited emails and then misspelling on the email address, those are going to be the clues. Here is domain spoofing and DNS spoofing. So domain spoofing is to use an entirely new domain rather than hacking the DNS server. So they would host an actual domain, right? And then somehow redirect it to that domain. So you would have a domain spoofing. Looks just like the real thing, like I talked about in the banking situation. And then your DNS spoofing, which is different than domain spoofing. This is known as DNS server poisoning. And if you hear the term poisoning, you already know, right? They're modifying the records or the farming attack. So that means that they would translate the domain name into an IP address, and this would be using their own IP address. And the only way that we can do this is to modify the A record for IPv4, the quadruple A record for IPv6, right? And maybe an SOA. So the DNS contains these files that would correlate the IP address, the public IP, to the domain name. And so if they go in and modify the record, and how can you stop that? DNSSEC, right? On our end, but also if your user is exposed to this, if they are able to detect that it is not the real website, that is not, it's redirecting, right? They should not click any kind of unknown link anyway, right? So now a lot of the times, outside of just capturing private information, likely that you're going to have malware infection through these domains. So, why go the extra step to do these things, right? If I cannot take your information, then I will corrupt your information. And so that's normally the tactic. So malware can automatically be downloaded. A lot of people had a hard time wrapping their head around this, right? They said, well, I didn't click anything. I just visited a website. What harm does it do, right? Because I've done security training and people are like, well, I simply just went to a website. I didn't do anything. How did that malware get on my computer, right? So it's simply a way that they coded it in. As soon as that page is loaded, right, the file is downloaded, and sometimes it doesn't even notify the user, and then they don't know that malware actually exists on their system, and then they log on to the network, and then now it spreads, right? And so whenever that we do forensic and we track back and we say, oh, you got this malware from this website, and then they said, how? I simply just go to the website. I didn't click anything, right? And so this can be automatically happening. So just make sure that they know not to go to unknown website. Yes. Because your domain might be protected, your security system will sound off the alarm. there might be so much more resource by hacking into someone's domain. Let's say that if I house my website on AWS, Amazon is also gonna make sure that their system is not gonna be breached, right? So they are gonna also maintain the security part on that end. So an attempt to hack something is probably more difficult than just to pretend to be that, right? So if they create a similar or the same exact website and posted it elsewhere on another server, it's probably harder to detect. And it can go by, undetected quickly, okay? Because hosting a domain doesn't cost a lot of money. Really, it doesn't. And then there are tons of servers elsewhere, their own servers. And so, you guys probably know, right? They say that on the dark web, these servers exist. And so if they take down one, another one will pop up because, the community itself actually support a lot of these things. So, and even if it's a legitimate server or something that they pay for, right? And you have to kind of dig into who is hosting at this one server that's gonna look almost like your real website. It's easy to make a website that looks like the real thing. It's just HTML and CSS and maybe like JavaScript, right? Okay. So let's bring 12 down in case we were working on that. For 13, the difference between website spoofing and domain spoofing. Domain spoofing is a process within website spoofing. The attacker creates a new domain to create fake websites for phishing. Like, I want to pretend to be Bank of America. I would get a server to host my site, make it look like Bank of America. So in that, I'm actually performing domain spoofing, right? I might say, I might not use bofa.com. I might use bankofa.com, something similar. So that way people don't look at the URL. They would say, oh, that's the real thing. The layout is going to look exactly like Bank of America, even the logo, right? That's easy to do. Capture the image online, right? Type that into the HTML code, load it, make sure that it looks really legitimate. So with that, I would get the client to log in and maybe, sometimes people log in and, I might give them a notification, login failed, right? You have 2 attempts left, that's easy to do. People don't look at that and say, okay, I'll type my username and password again. But it would not take them anywhere because it's not a real website, right? I just need their credentials so that way I can access their account. So that means that I am website spoofing as well, okay? For phishing. For 14, it says, what technique is used to spoof an email of a user? So they can choose to hide the sender address to display only the name, right? You know how sometimes when you get an email, right, it doesn't show the actual email address, it will show from John Doe, right? Because that's the registered name for that email address. So they would try to display only like a first name or a full name that is believable. They also try to use real name that you would trust, right? Someone you know, someone in your circle, someone in your company. And so when you recognize that, you would instantly trust that email and you would open it. So when they combine the real name and the legitimate domain name in the header, that would trick the user. So the user would say, oh, I know this person, I will open up the email, right? Because if you don't know the person, you just skip that email or press delete. You don't care, right? So if I'm able to see that someone I know and trust, I would open the email. So how can we detect DNS spoof and farming for number 15? you would often see redirection of DNS, unsecure website, or errors on the website. Those are some of the main clues that you would see that for DNS spoofing or farming. Kind of short assignment today, right? Any question? So part of security is also to keep up with the trend in security, right? So I would encourage you to kind of read some of the recent events and incidents that happens, and the media is pretty good at showing you that. And then if you have that in your news feed, you can look at it, or you can use a certain repository to go and read the news. That's gonna kind of help you predict what's going on. And so it might not happen to the company now, right? But if it happens to you know, so a similar company or someone, you can use that as a learned lesson and be able to prepare. So it's always good to keep up with the media. But then some of that, the negative aspect is it makes you paranoid and very suspicious of everything that you use and do. Okay. I'm going to stop recording.